Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Okay, I don't want to cut into any more of his time. Colonel Craig Roberts, you want to take what's happening with the economy first? We talked about years ago, the globalists for engineering for control. They're proposing a world banking government run by them after they engineered it as the new savior to all of this. You want to talk about the police and military, Northcom announcing that they are going to engage in domestic operations for civil unrest with regular Army brigades, everything we warn people about, the federal police force. I mean, what do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's hit the economy first and get that out of the way, Alex.
It's good to have you here, my friend. Yeah, break that down.
Okay. You know, we talked about this a long time ago. If you look at this differently, you have to understand there is no money in the stock market. The stock market doesn't have a dime. The money is either in the corporations or in the shares of those corporations that you and I own as stockholders. And it's when we go in and buy and sell, it creates situations where people look at that and they go, you know what, I better get out of this. This looks really bad. And they panic and they start dumping stocks, and it drives the stock market down and so on and so forth. And when you go in and you start tearing out the economic base of these banks and loan companies and these mortgage things, that only throws, gas on the fire, and then we end up with the situation we've got now. Well, that's looking at it from one door. But let's walk around the other side of the house and open the other door and look in and see what's really going on from a different view that no one seems to be discussing right now. I look at it at a military aspect, and the military aspect is if you're going to destroy a country, there's several things you can do, several things you have to do. You can't just march in with troops and start shooting. That's not going to work. If the country has the will to fight, you're going to lose. You have to destroy the will of that country to fight. You have to destroy the motivation for people in that country to do anything. You have to take away the reconnaissance. You have to take away their eyes by using the media to tell them, don't worry about anything. Sit on the couch, open another six-pack, and watch the ball game. Shut up, stay out of the way. The government will take care of you. And so people take their antenna down, they fold up the radar set and put it away, and then they sit there and let this sort of things happen. You'd have to destroy the morale of a country. You have to destroy the morals of a country. You have to create a hopeless situation to where the people won't rally around anything central or anything big. And then you have to cut off the logistics to that country by moving the industrial base away from that country, move it out of the country, send it overseas, send the jobs overseas. You have to dumb down the education of the children so as they get older, they don't see that there's anything going wrong and that the government is always right. Then you have to remove the barriers, tear down the walls, and open the borders to allow anybody to come in that wants to come in and bring all the crime, all the drugs, anything else they want to reinforce your total battle plan.
And that weighs down the states and bankrupts them.
And all of this stuff creates a situation where the government has to use money out of your pocket to solve the problem. It's the old Hegelian effect all over again. So all of these things attack us at once. We don't know which window of the cabin to run to shoot out of. We're sitting here going, man, I don't know what to do. Maybe I ought to just buy a boat and go to Costa Rica. Maybe I ought to just get a whole bunch of food and lock all my doors and stay here till this thing blows over. Maybe I ought to just plant a garden, And then we start studying, especially the baby boomer generation. They're looking at this. They've already been through some of this stuff before, and they're looking at this stuff now in their 60s and 70s going, my retirement's going out the window. I can't get a job. I'm too old to do that. I can't support myself and my family. How am I going to survive? And if the government collapses, if I've got a government pension or Social Security, I'm not even going to get that. So now what do I do? So we end up being Europe in 1943 when countries are being invaded and the refugees are beginning to leave. It's that same mental aspect of population panic. And that's all programmed. This stuff does not happen by accident. This stuff happens because it's set up years and years in advance as part of a total plan to do something. And one of the things they've failed at so far, they haven't completely failed, but they've partially failed. You can't turn the peasants into slaves unless you disarm them. Well, they've been the Clinton administration spent 8 years trying to reduce our firepower. They couldn't totally disarm us on the Second Amendment, but they tried to reduce our firepower. Said, you can only have a magazine that's 10 rounds or less. You can't have this on your gun. It can't be ugly and black and blah blah blah.
But that only raised alarm flags, so people armed up even more.
It backfired. It backfired so big they didn't realize what they had done. They pushed the wrong kind of people. They had underestimated the basic mainstream American mentality that's inbred in us, all the way from the Pilgrims up, and that is people ran down. They started buying up every piece of ammunition they could get. They bought every gun they could afford. They started they did panic buying because they didn't want instead of sitting there like the Australians and the Canadians and the Brits and roll over and say, "Here's my guns. You can roll over them with a street roller." People bought more guns and they hid them. I mean, they probably sold more PVC pipe.
Because in the first 200 years of this country, it was a barbaric frontier warfare nation, and only the strong could survive. And so even if we're fat, dumb, and happy, those original genetics and those original information was carried on.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can find examples throughout American history when there wasn't really a lot going on, but all of a sudden everybody just rallied around a situation. You're sitting right there next to the Alamo. The Alamo was a classic example of people rallying and with single-shot muskets holding off an entire army of well-trained soldiers. You've got other situations that cropped up through American history where people just within a moment's notice all of a sudden became a militia or all of a sudden became an army in their own right and were able to defeat superior odds with motivation and courage and just plain guts. And so we still have that in us today. We still look back at our ancestors and see what they did. I look at stuff like the Civil War. And on both sides of the Civil War, we could not fight that war today. Our Army, Alex, could not fight the Civil War today with the conditions they went through, with the equipment they had. They're not tough enough. I know. I was in it long enough. You look at the Battle of Gettysburg alone. In July, it was hot, and the Union Army made contact with the Confederate Army, who had been forging up north and was coming back south at Gettysburg. They made contact with the lead elements, and they had 30 miles of troops strung out down the road with hot, full-sleeve wool uniforms in the middle of July, carrying packs full of all their gear, big heavy muskets, bayonets, canteens, the whole bit, and ordered them to run to the battle. And these people ran for miles. A lot of them had to dump their packs, and the farmers stole them, so they didn't have food when they got there. But the bottom line was they ran all the way to the battle, and then they fought the battle when they got there. Our guys would have dropped out along the road today. I hate to say that, but we're just not geared for that. We're geared more to jump on the Humvee, jump on the tank, ride as far as we can, get on the helicopter, then fight door to door, but not do the long infantry-type battles that they had in those days. That can change out of necessity. But today, it's a totally different scenario. Even though we look back and we said, they did it, we can do it too. We're not ready to do it, but we could do it if we had to. Now, when we take all of these things, what they've really done here, here's what the New World Order pukes have really done. They have created an enemy at the gate. And and now they're starting to open the door to let the enemy in. And if you don't have a problem, of course, you're not going to have a solution. Well, the solution is to destroy the economy more, to do these massive bailouts, to spend more money. Look how much money they spend on the war on drugs, and all it's done is the drug importation has gotten more and more every year. Look how much they spend on the border, and it's doing less every year than it ever did before. It doesn't matter what it is. They spend money, but it doesn't do any good because it's not being spent in the right places and then led by the right people and supervised by the right people. So basically what it is, it's creating more of a debt, and the debt is one thing. And as the Rothschilds said back in Europe in 1773, they said, debt is power. I care not who wins on either side of a conflict. If I loan money to both sides, in the end, they are both in my debt, and I control them on both sides. And that's what the Rothschild plan was back then, and it still works today.
And so let's talk about what they're planning to do now, and then the wild card, because the police and military, look at Ron Paul getting 73% of all the Republican donations and outweighing even Obama's donation from the military. That sends the signal that the military is with the people.
Well, yeah, the military is by and large. You're not going to have it, and this is there's a plan A and a plan B at work here. The plan A is the morons behind this thing sit in their little ivory towers and their little, oak panel rooms, and they come up with all these grandiose plans, and they base everything on their good old boy tie and their bank account and who they know and so on and so forth. But they really don't know what's going on beyond the Alleghenies. And they don't take anything as a genuine threat. When I testified before Congress on April the 5th of 1995, I mentioned to those guys, I said, look, all the Second Amendment stuff you guys are pulling, what it's doing is it's making a lot of people real nervous out in the main part of the rest of the country in flyover land, and they're actually forming militias to resist the government to come in and take away their guns. And they looked at me and said, there's no such thing as any militias out there. This is in 1995. That's how insulated these people are. So when they don't realize, they don't believe, even if they get the intelligence reports that there's a huge movement in this country of sympathy in a certain direction, they don't believe it. They believe the New York Times poll. They believe CNN polls. That's what they look at. They don't listen to you and me. And so what's happening is they don't understand that the military has swung more and more and more to the right and conservative and patriotic, but more and more distrustful of the government. And it was the same way when I was in Vietnam. I would fight for my country, and I would fight for the guys that I was with, but I hated LBJ, and I hated everything he stood for.